The Galactic Council Chamber was designed to intimidate. Everything about it, from the towering curved walls that stretched up nearly 100 meters to the seats arranged in tiered semicircles facing the central podium, screamed your species is insignificant in the grand scheme of things. This architectural reminder of cosmic humility, while on most species, but not humans. Ambassador Jack Kennedy stood at the central podium, his posture relaxed despite the 37 pairs of alien eyes fixed on him. At 45, Jack was the perfect representative of humanity, tall enough to command respect, with a diplomatic smile that revealed just the right amount of teeth, not enough to trigger the predator response in prey species, but sufficient to remind everyone that humans evolved as hunters. Ambassador Kennedy. The Council recognizes Earth's petition to establish a defensive perimeter around the Arcturus system. Droned High Counselor Excel, a 7-eye stalk swiveling independently. However, the Vrex'xi Empire has raised objections. We shall hear both arguments today. Jack nodded politely. Thank you, High Counselor. The United Earth government appreciates the Council's time. From the highest tier, Ambassador Q-Val of the Glesian Federation leaned toward their aide and whispered, "Remarkable creatures, these humans. Their historical archives document thousands of years of tribal warfare, nuclear standoffs, and planetary devastation. Yet in diplomatic settings, they're unfailingly polite." The aide fluttered their membranes in agreement. Their behavioral switch is fascinating. Our xenopsychologists call it human polite mode. They theorize it evolved as a social mechanism to prevent their violent tendencies from disrupting their own political gatherings. Wouldn't want to see what happens when that switch turns off. Q-Val chuckled, settling back in their seat. In the 6 years since humanity had been welcomed into the galactic community, they'd developed a paradoxical reputation. Their historical archives, which they'd shared with shocking transparency, revealed a species that had spent most of its existence finding creative ways to kill each other. Yet in person, human diplomats were unfailingly courteous, even when provoked. Some council members found it unsettling, others found it admirable. None of them had yet seen what happened when a human's polite mode disengaged. They were about to find out. Ambassador Morg of the Vrex'xi Empire slithered to the secondary podium, towering nearly 3 meters tall when fully extended. The Vrex'xi were relatively new to the galactic stage, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 2 centuries ago. What they lacked in technological innovation, they made up for in territorial aggression. The Vrex'xi Empire, Morg began, his translator converting his high-pitched vocal emissions into the standard galactic common, defines the human presence in the Arcturus system to be an unacceptable security threat. Jack Kennedy maintained his diplomatic smile, though anyone familiar with human expressions might have noticed it had become slightly fixed. The Arcturus system lies 15 light-years from Earth, Morg continued, but only 8 from our nearest colony. Simple spatial mathematics dictates that it falls within our sphere of influence. With respect, Ambassador, Jack replied evenly, Earth has established scientific outposts in Arcturus for nearly a decade. The system contains no Vrex'xi settlements or installations. Morg's hood expanded, a sign of irritation among his species. The Vrex'xi Empire claims all systems within 10 light-years of our territories as buffer zones. This is non-negotiable. From the council tiers, several species shifted uncomfortably. The Vrex'xi were known for their territorial demands, but usually with more finesse. This blunt approach was unusual. Ambassador Morg, Jack said, his voice remaining level, Earth has filed all proper documentation with the Council for our Arcturus installations. We've followed every protocol to the letter. Protocols, Morg hissed dismissively. Human protocols mean nothing to the Empire. The Vrex'xi demand that all human installations in the Arcturus system be dismantled within 1 standard galactic month. A murmur rippled through the council chamber. Such direct demands were rarely made in this forum. And if we refuse? Jack asked, his smile now barely perceptible. Then the Empire will consider it an act of aggression, Morg replied, his translator somehow managing to convey his smugness. We would be forced to take protective measures. Jack's left eyebrow raised a fraction. Are you threatening military action against Earth's scientific outposts? Not a threat, Ambassador Kennedy. A promise. Morg's hood expanded to its full intimidation display. The Vrex'xi Empire has observed humanity's rapid expansion with concern. You're an unpredictable species with a violent history. The Council coddling you doesn't change that fact. In the observation gallery, xenopsychologist Dr. Tara Miller leaned forward with interest. The humans she'd studied were masters at maintaining composure under pressure, but everyone had breaking points. Her instruments detected elevated heart rate and blood pressure in Ambassador Kennedy, though his external demeanor remained unchanged. Ambassador Morg, Jack began carefully, I suggest we establish a joint committee to discuss mutual security concerns in the Arcturus region. Earth is open to finding a solution that addresses Vrex'xi concerns while preserving our scientific missions. There will be no committee, Morg declared. There will be no negotiation. The Arcturus system belongs to the Vrex'xi sphere of influence. Your people will vacate, or they will be removed. The chamber fell silent. Every council member recognized the implied military threat a serious breach of diplomatic protocol. High Councillor Selb's eye stalks quivered with concern. Ambassador Morg, the Council must remind you that threats of force against member species violate Section 12 of the Galactic Charter. The Empire acknowledges the Charter, Morg replied dismissively, but maintains its sovereign right to protect its territories from encroachment. Jack Kennedy's diplomatic smile had completely vanished now, replaced by a neutral expression that several council members found more disconcerting than Morg's open hostility. Ambassador Morg, Jack said quietly, Earth has no quarrel with the Vrex'xi Empire. But we will not abandon our people in Arcturus based on an arbitrary territorial claim. Then prepare for consequences, human, Morg hissed. Your species' arrogance will be its downfall. Ambassador Morg slithered closer to the central podium, violating the formal spacing protocols of the chamber. The move caused several security drones to shift position, their sensors registering the potential for confrontation. Let me be perfectly clear, Ambassador Kennedy, Morg said, lowering his voice to a menacing hiss that nonetheless carried throughout the chamber. The Vrex'xi Empire has studied your species extensively. We know your weaknesses. Jack maintained his composure, though those closest to the podium noticed his hands gripping the edge slightly tighter. Your colonies are vulnerable, Morg continued. Your defense is primitive. Your technology borrowed. You have no allies who would risk confrontation with the Empire on your behalf. From the council tiers, Ambassador Val shifted uncomfortably. The Vrex'xi's assessment wasn't entirely wrong. Humanity was still integrating into the galactic community, and their military capabilities were limited compared to established powers. Ambassador, Jack replied, his voice maintaining its diplomatic tone, threats do not constitute productive dialogue. I again suggest we establish formal discussions. I'm not finished, human, Morg interrupted, his hood expanding to its full intimidation display. The Arcturus outpost, your so-called scientific installation. We know what it really is. A confused murmur spread through the chamber. The Arcturus base was a well-documented research station focused on xenobiology and stellar dynamics. It's a human breeding colony, Morg declared. We've intercepted your transport manifests. 26 offspring were transported there in the last solar cycle. You're using Arcturus as a foothold for expansion. In the gallery, Dr. Miller sat up straight. The Arcturus station had recently established Earth's first off-world school for the children of the scientific personnel. It was a point of pride for humanity, their first generation to be raised among the stars. Those are the children of our scientists, Jack explained, a new edge in his voice. Earth follows the Galactic Charter's provision allowing families to remain together during extended assignments. Of course, Morg said with dismissive sarcasm. Just as I'm sure those science vessels patrolling the system's edge are merely collecting space dust. They're survey ships, Jack said, the diplomatic lilt fading from his voice, as we've documented in our. They're warships, Morg cut in. Primitive ones, but warships nonetheless. The Empire will not tolerate military assets disguised as civilian installations, especially not when they're being used to shield spawning colonies. A dangerous silence fell over the chamber. Several of the more perceptive species noticed the subtle change in Ambassador Kennedy's demeanor, a straightening of the spine, a slight flushing of the skin, a shift in breathing pattern. "Ambassador Morg," Jack said, his voice notably flatter now, "I suggest you choose your next words with extreme care." Morg either missed the warning or chose to ignore it. He leaned closer, his translator amplifying his next words for maximum effect. "When the Empire removes your illegal installations from Arcturus, we will not distinguish between your scientists and their spawn. The children you've placed in harm's way will be dealt with according to Imperial protocols for unauthorized biological contaminants." The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. Even by the Vrex'xi's aggressive standards, threatening children violated the most fundamental principles of galactic diplomacy. High Councillor Xelb's eye stalks shot upward in alarm. "Ambassador Morg, the Council condemns this statement in the strongest possible." Whatever the High Councillor intended to say next was drowned out by a sound no one in the chamber had heard before, a short, sharp laugh from Ambassador Kennedy. And not a laugh of amusement, but something entirely different, something cold. Jack Kennedy straightened to his full height, rolled his shoulders, and cracked his neck, an oddly primitive gesture that seemed out of place in the formal setting. Then he reached up and loosened his formal diplomatic collar. In the gallery, Dr. Miller whispered into her recorder, subject displaying classic human pre-confrontation behaviors. A polite mode, disengaged. "You know," Jack said, his voice transformed from its diplomatic tone to something rougher, more natural. "I've been standing at this podium for nearly 6 hours today. That's 6 hours of maintaining what we humans call a professional demeanor. It's honestly exhausting." He stepped away from the podium, moving with a new freedom of motion that several council members found alarming. "So I want to thank you, Ambassador Morg," Jack continued, a smile spreading across his face that bore no resemblance to his previous diplomatic expression. "You've just given me permission to take a break." "Let me make something perfectly fucking clear," Jack Kennedy announced, the translation system momentarily struggling with the unfamiliar human profanity before rendering it in harsh galactic common. Several council members gasped. In 6 years of human participation, no representative had ever used such language in the chamber. "The children at Arcturus Station are not spawn. They're not biological contaminants. They are our kids." Jack's voice had transformed completely, dropping several registers and shedding all traces of diplomatic modulation. "And you just threatened to harm them." He stepped around the podium, ignoring protocol completely. "Now I've spent months in this chamber learning your customs, respecting your traditions, and smiling through 17 different species, telling humans where we can and cannot go in our own backyard. I've done this because Earth believes in the principles of peaceful coexistence." Jack pointed directly at Morg, causing the Vrex'xi's hood to flare defensively. "But there's something you and apparently the entire council need to understand about humans. Our politeness is not weakness. It's a choice." In the gallery, Dr. Miller was recording frantically. The first documented case of complete diplomatic filter disengagement in a human ambassador. Heart rate elevated but controlled. Subject appears to be entering what humans call teaching someone a lesson mode. "You see," Jack continued, pacing now, "humans spent thousands of years trying to kill each other before we figured out how to play nice. We're really good at violence. We've perfected it, industrialized it, turned it into an art form. Then we decided collectively that maybe we should try something different." He stopped and faced the entire council, but make no mistake. "We didn't forget how to be dangerous. We just put it on the shelf." Ambassador Kuval leaned forward, utterly fascinated. The humans' behavior had changed so dramatically it was as if a different species now stood before them. "Ambassador Morg," Jack said, turning back to the Vrex'xi, "let me tell you exactly what will happen if a single human child on Arcturus Station is harmed. Earth won't file a complaint with the Council. We won't demand sanctions. We won't propose a strongly worded resolution." He smiled, and several prey species in the chamber felt an instinctive urge to flee. "We will, to use a technical human diplomatic term, fuck your shit up." The translation system hesitated again before rendering the statement in Galactic Common, causing a wave of shocked murmurs. Those primitive ships you mentioned, they're armed with what we call relativistic kill vehicles. Simple concept, really. Take a tungsten rod, accelerate it to 99% the speed of light, and aim it at something you don't like. No fancy shield technology required. Just good old-fashioned physics. Jack was in full flow now, gesturing animatedly. And here's the fun part. We have thousands of them, because while you see humans as newcomers to the galactic community, what you're actually looking at is a species that spent its entire history preparing for enemies exactly like you. In the council tiers, the representative from the Hadorian collective whispered to his neighbor, "Is this accurate? Could their technology truly?" "Unknown," replied the Axelrod delegate. "Human military capabilities have never been fully documented. They've been categorized as a Category 3 civilization, but this suggests..." "The Vrex'xi Empire," Jack continued, "spans what, 14 systems? Earth is just one planet, sure. But unlike you, we don't need to conquer a system to deploy assets there. We just need a fast ship and a good target." Chancellor Xelb had recovered enough to attempt intervention. "Ambassador Kennedy, the Council recognizes your distress, but threats of military action..." "Oh, I'm not threatening military action, Counselor," Jack interrupted with alarming casualness. "I'm explaining consequences. There's a difference." He turned back to Morg. "Let me be crystal clear, so there's no misunderstanding. The Arcturus system isn't a hill humans are willing to die on, it's a hill we're willing to make you die on. Every single one of our outposts, scientific or otherwise, contains humans, and all humans, especially our children, are under the protection of Earth." Jack's voice dropped, becoming unnervingly quiet. "We have a saying on Earth, fuck around and find out. Consider this your one and only warning not to fuck around with our kids." The chamber erupted into chaos. Species with heightened auditory sensitivity covered their hearing appendages as overlapping shouts, buzzes and telepathic bursts filled the space. Security drones hovered uncertainly, their programming not equipped to handle a diplomatic incident that hadn't yet escalated to physical violence. Ambassador Morg's hood had fully contracted a sign of extreme distress in his species. This outburst will be reported to the Vrex'xi High Command," he sputtered, his translator struggling to convey the appropriate level of indignation. "Please do," Jack replied with unsettling calm. "Make sure you include the part about threatening children. I'm curious how that'll play with your public." High Counselor Xelb's eye stalks were quivering so rapidly they had become a blur. "The chamber will have order." They finally managed to broadcast through the Council's priority channel. "This session is temporarily suspended for a cooling-off period of 1 standard hour." As Council members began filing out, many cast nervous glances toward the human ambassador, who had returned to leaning casually against the podium. The transformation was so complete that several species wondered if they had hallucinated the previous few minutes. In a private antechamber off the main floor, the Emergency Diplomatic Council consisting of the 5 most senior ambassadors convened hurriedly. "This is unprecedented," declared Ambassador Zith of the Palaxian hegemony. "We must censure the human for his behavior. We must censure the Vrex'xi for threatening children," countered Ambassador Q-Val. "No diplomatic protocol permits such actions." "Both violated chamber etiquette," Selb said wearily. "But I'm more concerned about what happens next, if the humans' claims about their military capabilities are accurate." "They're not," Zith interrupted. "Humans are a Category 3 civilization. Their technology is primarily borrowed or adapted." "That classification was based on their official disclosures," Q-Val pointed out. "What if they've been understating their capabilities?" The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Meanwhile, in a different antechamber, Dr. Miller was attempting to interview Ambassador Kennedy, who had accepted a glass of water and was examining it with mild interest. "Your physiological response was fascinating, Ambassador," she said. "The switch from diplomatic mode to..." "Just Jack is fine now," he replied, taking a sip. "And there's no switch, Dr. Miller, just choices about which face to show the galaxy. But the level of control..." is something every human learns by about age 5, Jack explained. We call it indoor voice versus outdoor voice. Today, the council got to hear my outdoor voice. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a Vrex'xi aide, who entered the room cautiously. Ambassador Kennedy. The aide began formally. Ambassador Morg requests a private audience to discuss clarifications regarding the Arcturus situation. Jack smiled, a genuine smile this time. Tell him I'd be delighted. 30 minutes later, Jack Kennedy and Ambassador Morg emerged from their private meeting. Morg's hood was partially expanded, a neutral position indicating neither aggression nor submission. The council will reconvene, announced High Councillor Xelb, their eye stalks now under rigid control. Once all members had returned to their positions, Morg slithered to the secondary podium. The Vrex'xi Empire wishes to clarify its earlier statements. He began stiffly. Our concerns about the Arcturus system were expressed with unfortunate imprecision. A diplomatic way of saying he regretted threatening to kill children, Jack thought. Upon further consideration, Morg continued. The Empire proposes a joint security commission to establish protocols for shared activity in the Arcturus region. The Empire recognizes that human scientific installations pose no inherent threat to Vrex'xi interests. Several council members exchanged surprised glances. The Vrex'xi were not known for backing down. Furthermore, Morg added, sounding as though each word caused him physical pain, the Empire extends formal apologies for any statements that could be interpreted as threatening toward juvenile humans. Such interpretations were unintended. Jack stepped forward to the central podium, once again the picture of diplomatic composure. Earth accepts the Vrex'xi Empire's clarification and welcomes the proposal for a joint commission. In the spirit of galactic cooperation, we look forward to establishing mutual security protocols that respect the interests of both our peoples. His tone was perfectly modulated, his posture professionally correct, his expression pleasantly neutral. It was as if the previous outburst had never happened. Many council members found this rapid transition more unnerving than the outburst itself. As the council session concluded, ambassadors filed out of the chamber in unusually tight groups, many casting wary glances toward Jack Kennedy, who was engaged in apparently friendly conversation with a representative from the Arcturian Observer Corps. In the transit lounge, Ambassador Val cornered Dr. Miller. Your analysis of human diplomatic behavior seems incomplete. Doctor, they said accusingly. You never mentioned this transformation capability. Dr. Miller smiled. It wasn't my information to share. But I will note that in the 6 years humans have participated in the Council, this is the first time any ambassador has disengaged their diplomatic protocols. It took a direct threat to their young to trigger it. A valuable data point, Val admitted. The Galactic Federation will be updating our diplomatic approach accordingly. I would recommend all species do the same, Miller replied. Humans prefer peace, but they're prepared for alternatives. Always. In the following days, several notable changes rippled through the galactic diplomatic community. The Vrex'xi Empire formally withdrew its territorial claims to 3 disputed systems, not just Arcturus. 6 pending trade agreements with Earth were suddenly approved after months of delays. And most tellingly, the Council's administrative office created a new emergency protocol titled Human Anger Management Procedures. 2 weeks later, Jack Kennedy sat in his office at the Earth Embassy, reviewing reports from the newly established Joint Commission with the Vrex'xi. A chime announced the arrival of his assistant, Miguel. The High Councillor's office sent this, Miguel said, placing a data tablet on Jack's desk. New diplomatic guidelines. Apparently they're being distributed to all member species. Jack scrolled through the document, a smile growing on his face. The guidelines detailed appropriate and inappropriate topics when engaging with human representatives, with threats to human offspring categorized under extreme diplomatic risk avoid at all costs. They've been studying us, Jack noted with amusement. Sir, Miguel said hesitantly, about what happened in the chamber. Was that planned? A strategic display? Jack leaned back in his chair, considering the question. Not exactly planned, no, but not entirely unexpected either. Humans have been playing nice since we joined the galactic community. Sooner or later, someone was going to mistake that for weakness. And now they won't, Miguel concluded. Exactly. Jack set down the tablet. The galaxy needed to understand something fundamental about humanity. We're not peaceful because we don't know how to be violent. We're peaceful because we know exactly how to be violent, and we choose something better. He smiled diplomatically, the same smile he'd worn for 6 years in the council chamber. Most of the time, anyway. In the Vrex'xi embassy across the diplomatic quarter, Ambassador Morg reviewed his own copy of the new guidelines, his hood contracting with what his species recognized as embarrassment. At the bottom of the document, a simple addendum had been added specifically for the Vrex'xi delegation. When engaging with human representatives, remember their saying, "Fuck around and find out." The Council strongly recommends not doing the former to avoid experiencing the latter.